Welcome to our documentary series. Today we are going to talk about Renaissance art and humanism. This is a story about a big change in how people saw the world.
A big change? What kind of change?
For a long time, people in Europe believed that God was the center of everything. Life, art, and learning were all about God. But slowly, people started to look at something else.
What did they start to look at?
They started to look at people, at humans. They asked, what can a person do? What can a person feel? What can a person create? This new way of thinking changed art, science, and how people lived.
So this documentary is about that change?
Yes. We will look at 5 important parts of this story. We will see how old ideas from ancient Greece and Rome came back. We will meet great artists, and we will see how all of this still matters today. Let us begin. Let us start at the beginning. Imagine a very long sleep. For hundreds of years, people in Europe focused only on the church and on God. They did not read old books from ancient Greece or Rome. Those books were forgotten.
Forgotten? How can people forget important books?
It was not simple. After the Roman Empire fell, many libraries were lost. Wars happened. Cities burned. And the church taught people that ancient ideas were not important because they were not about God.
So nobody read those old books at all?
Some people did. Monks copied old texts by hand in monasteries. But most people never saw them. Then something changed. Scholars from Byzantium, which is the eastern part of the old Roman world, began to come to Italy. They brought old books with them.
Why did they come to Italy?
Their city, Constantinople, was in danger. It was being attacked. So many scholars escaped and came west. They carried texts from ancient philosophers, poets, and scientists. When Italian thinkers read these books, they were amazed.
What did they find in those books?
They found ideas about humans, about reason, about beauty, about living a good life on earth. These ideas said that humans are important, not just in the next life, but in this life too. This was very new and very exciting for people at that time.
What did they call this new way of thinking?
They called it humanism. Humanism means putting humans at the center of learning and life. Humanists believed that studying language, history, and philosophy could make people better.
And art changed too, right?
Yes. Artists began to look at ancient Greek and Roman statues and buildings. They studied the shapes, the proportions, and the beauty in those old works. They wanted to bring that beauty back.
Who helped make this possible?
One very important family was the Medici family in Florence. They were very rich and very powerful. They paid for scholars to find old books. They paid for artists to create new works. They opened a place called the Platonic Academy, where thinkers could meet and talk freely.
So money was important for this change?
Very important. Without people like the Medici family, many of these ideas could not have spread so fast. They understood that knowledge and art made their city great.
It sounds like a sleeping giant really did wake up.
That is a good way to think about it. Ancient wisdom had been sleeping for a long time, and when it woke up, it changed everything. Now we move to one of the most important changes in art. Artists began to study the human body very carefully.
Why did they start doing that?
Because they wanted their paintings and sculptures to look real. In medieval art, people in paintings looked flat and simple. Faces showed no feeling. Bodies looked stiff. Artists were not trying to copy nature. They were trying to show a spiritual idea.
And Renaissance artists wanted something different?
Yes. They wanted to show humans as they really are. Strong bodies, real faces, real emotions. To do this, they had to learn how the body works from the inside.
From the inside? You mean they looked inside the body?
Exactly. Some artists, including Leonardo da Vinci, went to hospitals and studied dead bodies. This was called dissection. Leonardo made hundreds of very detailed drawings of muscles, bones, and organs.
That sounds very difficult and maybe a little scary.
It was difficult, and it was also not allowed in many places. The church did not like it, but Leonardo believed that to draw the body correctly, he had to understand it completely.
Did his artwork get better because of this?
Much better. Look at his drawings of the human hand, or the face, or the leg. They look almost like photographs. He understood exactly how every muscle moves.
What about perspective? I have heard that word in art class.
Perspective is one of the most important tools in Renaissance art. It is a mathematical way to show depth on a flat surface. When you look at a road going far away, it looks like the sides of the road come together at one point. Artists learn to use this idea in paintings.
So the paintings look like you could walk into them?
Yes, that is a perfect way to say it. Before perspective, a painting looked like a flat picture. After perspective, it looked like a window into another world. This was a completely new experience for people who saw these paintings.
And sculpture changed too, right? I'm thinking about Michelangelo.
Yes, Michelangelo is a perfect example. When you look at his statue of David, you can see every muscle in the body. The veins in the hands, the tension in the legs. David looks like he is about to move. He looks alive.
How did Michelangelo learn to do that?
The same way as Leonardo. He studied the body. He also spent years looking at ancient Greek and Roman sculptures. Those old statues also showed perfect human bodies. Michelangelo wanted to do the same, but with even more feeling.
So both science and ancient art helped create this new style?
Exactly right. Renaissance artists did not just copy old ideas. They mixed ancient beauty with new science. The result was something the world had never seen before.
It is amazing how looking at the human body so carefully could create such beautiful art.
That is the heart of this period. Artists believed that the human body itself was beautiful. Not something to be ashamed of. Not just a container for the soul, but something wonderful, made like a god. Now we come to the three most famous artists of the Renaissance: Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, and Raphael. These three men changed art forever.
Were they all from Florence?
Not all of them were born there, but Florence was the center of the art world at that time. It was the city where the most important ideas and the most important money came together. All three artists spent important years of their lives there or nearby.
Let us start with Leonardo. What made him so special?
Leonardo was not just a painter. He was a scientist, an engineer, a musician, and a writer. He drew plans for flying machines, water systems, and weapons. He studied plants, rivers, and the stars. He wanted to understand everything.
That is a lot for one person.
Yes. And all of this thinking went into his paintings. Take the Mona Lisa. It is a painting of a woman, but it is also much more. Look at her face. She seems happy, but also a little sad. You cannot decide what she is feeling. That feeling is real and human and complex.
Why does her smile feel so mysterious?
Leonardo used a technique called sfumato. This means smoky in Italian. He painted the edges of her face and lips without a clear line. Everything is soft and slightly blurred. This makes her expression change depending on how you look at her. It is like a real face, not a simple painted one.
That is very clever. What about Michelangelo? He is very different, right?
Very different. Michelangelo was more emotional and more physical. He believed that the best art came from stone. He said that the sculpture already lived inside the marble. The artist just had to remove what did not belong.
That is a beautiful idea. And his most famous work is the Sistine Chapel ceiling?
Yes. Pope Julius II asked him to paint the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel in Rome. Michelangelo did not want to do it at first. He said he was a sculptor, not a painter. But he did it anyway.
How long did it take?
About 4 years. From 1508 to 1512. He worked lying on his back on a high platform, painting above his head every day. The ceiling shows many stories from the Bible. from the creation of the world to the story of Noah.
And the most famous part is God touching Adam?
Yes, in that image, God reaches out his hand toward Adam, and their fingers are almost touching. God looks powerful and full of energy. Adam looks relaxed, almost like he is just waking up. That small space between their fingers carries so much meaning. It shows the moment life begins.
It shows God and human together, almost equal.
That is a very good way to see it. In medieval art, God was always above and far away. But here, God comes close. He reaches toward a human. The human body is strong and beautiful. This is very much a Renaissance idea.
Now what about Raphael? He is younger than the other two, right?
Yes, Raphael was born in 1483, much later than Leonardo and Michelangelo. He learned from both of them. He studied Leonardo's softness and Michelangelo's strength. Then he created his own style.
What is his style like?
Raphael's paintings feel peaceful and harmonious. Every figure is in the right place. Every color works with the others. His people look gentle and kind. His most famous work is called The School of Athens. It shows many ancient Greek philosophers all together in one grand building.
Why is that painting important?
Because it shows that knowledge and reason are worthy of celebration. The great thinkers of ancient Greece are shown as heroes. Plato and Aristotle stand in the center. Around them, students and other philosophers debate and study. It is a picture of the Renaissance dream, that the life of the mind is the greatest life.
All three artists seem so different from each other.
They are very different. Leonardo was curious about everything. Michelangelo was intense and spiritual. Raphael was graceful and balanced. But they all shared one belief, that the human being is the most interesting and most beautiful subject for art.
And they all lived at the same time, in the same small part of Italy.
Yes, it is one of the most remarkable things in history. These three geniuses, and many others around them, were all working at the same time. People sometimes call this the High Renaissance. It lasted only about 30 years, but the art from that period has never been forgotten. Until now, we have talked mostly about religious art. Paintings of saints, Bible stories, God and Adam. But in this chapter, we look at something new. Artists began to paint ordinary life.
Ordinary life? Like what?
Like portraits of real people. Merchants, bankers, noble families, people who were not saints or kings, but who had money and wanted to be remembered. They asked artists to paint their faces, their clothes, their hands.
So rich people paid artists to paint them?
Exactly. As trade grew in cities like Florence, Venice, and Bruges, a new class of wealthy people appeared. They were not kings or priests. They were business people, and they wanted art that showed who they were.
Did they want to look important?
Yes, but also real. They wanted to look like themselves. This is why portrait painting became so popular. The portrait shows a real face, a real personality. Not an idealized saint, but a specific human being with a name and a story.
And self-portraits became popular too, right?
Yes, and this is very interesting. Before the Renaissance, artists almost never painted themselves. They were craftsmen, not famous people. But in the Renaissance, the artist became important. People wanted to know who made the painting.
So artists started to think of themselves differently?
Much differently. Albrecht Dürer, a German artist, painted himself looking directly at the viewer. He looks serious and confident. Some people say his self-portrait looks almost like a painting of Christ. He is saying, I am an artist, and that is something great.
That is a big change from the Middle Ages.
A very big change. In the Middle Ages, most art was not signed. The artist did not matter. Only God and the church mattered. But now, the artist had a name, a personality, and a reputation.
What about landscapes? Did nature start to appear in paintings too?
Yes, slowly. At first, nature appeared only in the background of religious paintings. But artists began to paint it more carefully and more lovingly. You can see this in Leonardo's paintings, where the backgrounds show mountains, water, and mist.
And in Northern Europe, art was different again, right?
Yes, the Northern Renaissance in places like the Netherlands and Germany had its own special character. Artists like Jan van Eyck and Hans Holbein painted with incredible detail. They could show the texture of cloth, the reflection in a mirror, the tiny drops of water on a flower petal.
How did they paint so much detail?
They used oil paint. This was very important. Oil paint dries slowly, so artists could work carefully and add many layers. They could correct mistakes. They could build up very fine details. This changed what was possible in painting.
So Northern and Italian artists were developing at the same time, but in different ways.
Yes, Italian artists focused on proportion, perspective, and the ideal human form. Northern artists focused on detail, texture, and the beauty of ordinary things. But both were saying the same thing in different ways. The world around us is worth looking at carefully.
And that is a very human idea, right? To look at the world and find it beautiful?
Very human. Medieval art looked past this world toward heaven. Renaissance art looked at this world and said, "This is also worth painting." A woman sewing, a man reading, a bowl of fruit on a table. These things matter too.
It sounds like art became more democratic, not just for churches, but for everyone with enough money.
That is a good point. Art moved out of the church and into homes, offices, and public buildings. It became part of everyday life. And the subjects of art became everyday life too.
So the canvas became a window, not just into heaven, but into the real world.
Exactly. And that window has never closed. We have arrived at our final chapter. We have seen how ancient ideas came back to life. We have seen how artists changed the way people looked at the human body, at nature, and at themselves. Now let us ask a bigger question. Why does all of this still matter today?
That is a good question. The Renaissance ended hundreds of years ago. What does it have to do with us now?
More than most people think. Let us start with one image. You have probably seen it before. It is a drawing of a man inside a circle and a square. His arms and legs are stretched out in different positions. It is called the Vitruvian Man, drawn by Leonardo da Vinci.
Yes, I have seen that image many times. What does it mean?
It comes from the ideas of an ancient Roman architect named Vitruvius. He wrote that the human body has perfect proportions. Leonardo drew this to show that the human body fits perfectly inside both a circle and a square. The message is that the human being is the measure of all things.
The measure of all things. What does that mean exactly?
It means that humans are the starting point for understanding the world. Not God, not kings, not tradition. The human mind, the human body, the human experience. This idea is at the heart of humanism, and it is also at the heart of the modern world.
Can you give some examples of how this idea spread?
Yes. Think about science. In the Renaissance, people like Leonardo and later Galileo began to say, "Let us not just read old books. Let us look at the world ourselves. Let us test our ideas. Let us use our own eyes and our own reason." This is the beginning of the scientific method.
So the Renaissance helped create modern science?
It planted the seeds. The full scientific revolution came a little later in the 1600s, with people like Galileo, Kepler, and Newton. But the attitude came from the Renaissance. The idea that a human being can discover truth through observation and reason.
What about politics? Did Renaissance ideas change how people thought about government?
Very much. Renaissance thinkers began to write about human dignity and human freedom. They said that people have value not because of their rank or their birth, but because they are human. This idea grew slowly over centuries. It became the foundation of modern democracy and human rights.
So when we talk about rights today, we are still using Renaissance ideas?
In a very deep way, yes. the language of rights, the idea that every person deserves respect and freedom, has roots in Renaissance humanism. It took a long time and many revolutions to turn those ideas into real laws. But the ideas started here.
What about education? Did the Renaissance change how people learned?
Yes, Renaissance educators believed that a person should learn many things. Not just religion, but also language, history, philosophy, music, mathematics, and art. They called this a well-rounded education. They had an ideal called the universal man, or Renaissance man, someone who is skilled and knowledgeable in many areas.
Like Leonardo himself.
Leonardo is the perfect example. He was a painter, a sculptor, an architect, an engineer, a musician, and a scientist. He believed that all knowledge is connected. That understanding one thing helps you understand another.
Do we still believe that today?
Some people do, and some do not. In modern times, we often specialize. We become experts in one narrow field. But many people feel that something is lost when we do that. The Renaissance idea of the whole person, someone who is curious about everything, is still an inspiring model.
What about art itself? How did the Renaissance change art forever?
It gave art a new purpose. Art was no longer just for teaching religion. It was for exploring the human experience, for asking questions, for showing beauty, emotion, and complexity. This opened a door that has never closed. Every art movement since the Renaissance has had to respond to it in some way.
Even modern art.
Even modern art. Some modern artists rejected Renaissance ideas completely. They moved away from realistic figures and perfect proportions. But to reject something, you must first know it. The Renaissance set the standard that all later artists worked with or worked against.
So it is like the Renaissance created the language of Western art.
That is a very good way to put it. It created a shared visual language. When we see a painting of a human figure that looks real, when we feel depth in a flat image, when we see emotion in a painted face, we are seeing the inheritance of the Renaissance.
And the Vitruvian Man, that simple drawing of a man in a circle, still appears everywhere. On book covers, in logos, in science posters.
Because it still carries meaning. It says that the human being is important, that we are worth studying, worth painting, worth celebrating. That idea was new and radical 500 years ago. Today it feels natural to us. That is how deeply the Renaissance has shaped our world.
It is strange to think that so much of what feels normal to us actually came from a specific moment in history.
That is the most important lesson. The way we see ourselves, the value we place on individual people, the belief that humans can discover truth through reason, these things did not always exist. People created them. And the Renaissance was the moment when many of those ideas first came alive.
Thank you. I feel like I see the world a little differently now.
That is exactly what good history does. It shows you that the world you live in was made by people, and that means it can be changed by people too. That is a very Renaissance idea. We have come to the end of our journey. From forgotten scrolls in dark libraries to the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. From a new way of looking at the human body to a new way of thinking about human rights.
It is remarkable how one period of time, in one part of the world, could change so much.
And remember, it did not happen by accident. It happened because people were curious, because they asked questions, because they looked at the world with open eyes and open minds. That is something anyone can do.
In any time, in any place.
Exactly. The Renaissance reminds us that big changes begin with small questions. A scholar opens an old book. An artist looks more carefully at a human hand. A thinker asks, what can a person truly know?
And from those small moments, the world changes.
The world changes. Thank you for watching, and keep asking questions.